Hello, welcome back to Read the World. My name is Derek Main and I review translated literature. And today we are reviewing the latest title from Deep Vellum, Jean-Luc Persecuted, by C.F. Ramuz, translated by Olivia Baes. And if you look at this beautiful cover there, it's done by Chad Felix, who is an artist that I really like. So anyway, he did the whole design for it. I think it's just awesome. And it's Deep Vellum. So this is, I'll read you the one sentence thing on the back so you get a sense of what it is we're reviewing today. The first English translation of a classic by Switzerland's most formative writer, a masterful exploration of societal's pressures, explosive effects set against the devastating natural landscape of Central Europe. Okay, so before I get into plot, comparisons, and what this very strange, very alluring book is about, I really did like it. And it's the language of it that propels it. But I think that's what makes it kind of the foremost thing to talk about is probably the translation. And there is an incredible translator's note by the translator, Olivia Baes, where she discusses and puts in some of Ramuz's own comments contemporaneously. This one is from a 1924 letter to his editor. And I really like this because it's relevant always for writing and today, and it's interesting to see these same arguments play out then. So Ramuz was being sort of put down as writing badly on purpose. That's the quote. Responding to claims by some of his contemporaries that he wrote badly on purpose and that he did not write in correct French. And so what this upset him the most, this popular belief that he wrote badly on purpose, and this is his words translated back to his editor in 1924. Need I tell you that this accusation is by far the most serious of all for me, the only one that actually affects me. It runs precisely in the opposite direction to all my tendencies, to all my research. It affects me right at the center. As on the contrary, I have always tried to be truthful and wrote badly precisely only out of a need to be more truthful, or if you will, more authentic, to be as true as authentic as possible. So I love that Olivia Baes, the translator, included that in there because as someone who tries to write, like that's a really meaningful sort of quick summation of why you may choose to write in different modes that some people might find as being badly on purpose. And that makes the translation of this piece like very critical because it's his language that makes the entire novel work. This story is funny and it is interesting. I will have a little bit to say about if there's any morality that might not carry through today or how we might look at that. But what makes it kind of a masterpiece is the writing, and the translator has to be able to get that writing and that tone. And it's not that they have to translate badly, but they have to translate, the bad words correctly and in an artistic and technical way. And I don't speak much French. I am on day 126 of a Duolingo of French, so I can say hello to a waiter. But anyway, it's a masterful job, and you just got to stop for a second and say, we only get to read all these works in so many different languages from so many different cultures and expand my mind because of the artistic and technical brilliance of translators. And in this case, this translator note in Olivia Baes and this translation, so critical, it's so important because it's also kind of a lost classic, as they say. So Jean-Luc Persecuted, I just quickly will get into the plot. Jean-Luc, so the landscape is very important. They kind of live in the valley of this sort of remote region, but also very small town. Like everyone knows everyone. There may be like 8 or 9 people that are kind of run into each other, right? And Jean-Luc has a wife, a son, and his wife is well, in the parlance of the day, and then now that parlance is popular again, cuckolding him, but his wife is seeing another man. And so that explosiveness kind of plays out, and that's not, honestly, not giving away much. And then it gets weirder as Jean-Luc falls down due to other circumstances that I won't give away, along with his wife leaving, falls down an even stranger rabbit hole and tries to find his own version of serenity, I won't say happiness, maybe contentment, within this very claustrophobic landscape where everyone knows all of his business, and his business is particularly sad. Now, the title of the work, Jean-Luc Persecuted. Let's get to the moral aspect of this really quick. Is Jean-Luc persecuted? I read this personally as a comedic work. I mean, I thought it was funny, and I do not think that he is persecuted. I mean, you know, bad things certainly happen to him, although he has a hand in all of them, I would argue. And certainly he is an outsider amongst his own little group, you know, mentally and in other ways, but I don't believe that he's persecuted. I believe that his interaction with the world brings about potentially a persecution complex, though not as stark as we might be led to believe. And so there I want to stop and show that's some of the nuance that really comes out even in the morality, where you kind of question it. But there are aspects of this work that I just think, to do a really thorough analysis of the text that I can't do, you'd need to know the time period and like what it was trying to do and say within that time, right? So I've been reading a lot lately. Like I read the Zweig, the chess story. I read The Blood Dark by Thoreau. I'm going to have a Walser review here in like sometime later this week or next week. And all of those are sort of these like similar European writers, at least that are dealing with sort of similar subjects, but from long ago, right? And you have to really have such a better understanding than I do of what's going on in that moment contemporaneously in their particular part of Europe to totally understand some of the political philosophy, if there's any, or morality issues, if there is any, and how they fit into that day. Because for me, Jean-Luc was someone who made laughable mistakes and is not someone who, as the back says, an exploration of societal pressures, explosive effects. I would disagree with that. I mean, but I think that I'm disagreeing from a place of ignorance and not from a place of knowledge, but just as a, hey, I'm reading this in 2020 and I'm just a reader and this is just what's here. I don't feel that societal's explosive, you know, pressures or anything is what did Jean-Luc in. I feel like the circumstances of his life and how he chose to react to them did him in, as they do in many people. But I didn't feel the societal pressure. What I felt was very similar to themes in Blood Dark, and also that I think Krasznahakari writes about today, particularly in Baron Homecoming, which is that tiny claustrophobic feel of a provincial town and how all of your business is just out there, and how difficult that can be if you are, let's say, the professor studying Moss in Krasznahakari's latest work, or in this case, if you are someone whose whole town knows that your wife cheated on you, and then another thing that we won't mention because you should read the book. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. Is this work dated? I wrote that down, and that's a question that I've been having since I've been reading this like 1920s, you know, early 19th or early 20th century rather, you know, European literature. I don't think it's dated because I think it's funny, and because I think that the language is so alluring, and the story really propels itself very well, and it gets to a very combustible ending. And I think that actually this is the type of work that you could teach for creative writing. Like, it is that sort of taut and wonderful spun tale. And so I do not think it is dated, but I think the morality aspect of it, or what lessons, if any, we may take away, those could be dated, or I could be reading it wrong. So Jean-Luc Persecuted. So I obviously I really like it. I'm going to do just two passages today. One, I hope to get across a little bit of what I'm kind of hinting around the edges at when it comes to morality and when it comes to how we're supposed to view Jean-Luc. We're going to see him in a moment of anger. That's on page 66. And this is when if it's not when he first finds out about his wife, it's, when he finds out that it's happening still or that kind of thing. And his wife's name is Christine, for perspective, while I read this. But Christine was upright again. They fought each other off for a while. She fell to her knees. She let out a terrible scream. The child, too, had woken. Jean-Luc said, "Ask for forgiveness." She had no desire to. 3 times she got back on her feet. 3 times he folded her back down to the ground, and her knees clapped against the floor. She closed her eyes, and he, raising his voice, asked for forgiveness. Did she hope this forgiveness would come, or was she defeated? At once she slumped forward, her braids hanging before her face. She said, "Forgive me." He immediately released her. Having gone to get her clothes from the chair, he brought them to her. "Dress yourself," he said. Then he returned to the crying child and, taking him in his arms, standing near the bed, rocked him. That scene is bothersome, right? A little bit? He's throwing her around and she's kneeling on the ground, ask for forgiveness. And I mean, obviously she did something within their relationship and their marriage vows, wrong. But he puts himself, he's not this type of character in this person. He's not written in a certain way where we believe in him in that moment, right? We don't believe that he's truly capable at that point of something so aggressive. And it feels like that's an aspect of societal pressure. He's playing it to a type and playing it to an expectation of how he should feel as he learns that his wife has been cheating on him. And some of that anger, it's almost too righteous. I mean, it's only 3 words, right? Ask for forgiveness. But just that continual thing he's doing there, it's interesting. It gives a little peek into him, but also I hope you can see there what I mean about the morality. I'm not sure I'm on Jean-Luc's side, and I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be. That's honestly my biggest takeaway. I do like in the second half where Jean-Luc takes his grief and how he carries literally and figuratively, his pain. But in this first part where his wife cheats on him with the dude, I don't know. It's just hard to believe him. It's hard to sort of be with him. You know what I mean? Because you're kind of good for her. Jean-Luc doesn't seem like he has it all together. Anyway, the last part I'll read is page 111, and this deals with Jean-Luc's contentment. It's really short. But it gives a sense, I think, of a type of contentment that we all look for and that he finds, although on a road that you would never want to travel. And yet others nearly envied him, though his happiness was false, but not to him, who was firm in his folly in such a way that he did not suffer at all. People were surprised by the gentleness of his voice. So I really like that. His happiness was false. That's what the town is seeing. That's what the world is seeing. That's what me, the reader, is seeing, but not to him. And so there we have the eternal question. So does it matter? The gentleness in his voice. I mean, okay, so the outside world thinks that it's false. He's happy. If he's truly convinced himself and put himself in that content mindset, then, isn't that, I don't know, the goal of many Eastern religions and many of the sort of contemporaneous self-help stuff that we're told? I don't know. He does it in a weird way, and it's odd, and he's an odd dude, and this is an odd book. But it's a big recommend. And in particular, again, I just have to say, because of the translator and the translator's note, that's what brings this thing to us 100 years later and says, let's go into the Swiss Alps in this weird little town and follow Jean-Luc around. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Be good to folks.